Well, first of all, my name is Delbert Riley, former President of Union Ontario Indians, former Chief of Chippewa of the Thames, and former National Leader of the Assembly First Nations. And as such, as Assembly, or actually it was, at that time it was called the National Indian Brotherhood. And I'd put things in place to get it changed over to the Assembly First Nations, which would have brought in every reserve. That was not the case before. And as such, the important thing here is that the constitutional discussions were happening around the time I got in as national leader, and I'd been actually working on this 7 years before, and for the very purpose of because the patriation of the Constitution seemed to be so important to the government of Canada, and I knew that we had to get our rights and treaties protected in there, because at this point in time, provinces were charging our people for hunting, fishing, and they were harvesting all the resources in all everybody's treaty lands without any kind of discussion or compensation. So extremely important to get our version and our understanding of what protection for the rights and treaties meant in the Constitution. So the wording that did go in was carefully constructed and carefully put together by Indian people from all across the country, who of course we had our legal staff there as well, to ensure that for one, it in fact did protect the rights of our people, and number two, it would last for as long as our people existed on this planet. And so it was a difficult process, because it was tough to get all the people together across Canada to support this. But given the time I had a couple years before, I was able to bring all of the sides together, and including the Inuit, who are in exactly the same situation the First Nations people are in. And I also got support from the Metis. Now, the Metis are, they didn't have any treaties or rights, and in fact were really just Canadians. And but they supported, and they didn't have the same kind of legal or rights reasons or treaty potential reasons that the First Nations had. And but they had most of them had some ancient connection with the Crees, and in fact it was that group of Métis that originally approached me, but they were from the Red River area, and the spokesman at that time was Harry Daniels, a good friend of mine, and he said he would be glad to support us, but the Métis would still want their name in there, even though they didn't have a definition of what a Métis was, or they didn't have any land claim or rights in the lands at all. Nothing of this was ever brought to my attention at that time. So, but in spite of that, I decided that yes, they have a right to be recognized, just like the French or hey, any other group, the British, just like them, they had a right to be recognized in this country, and but that is not the same as the Indian or the Inuit. So that's and then when we finally did get it in, I had to open an office in England because we were getting all sorts of backlash, all sorts of opposition on it. I opened an office in England and lobbied around the world. So in the end, the government that was in place in Canada, I should say, the colonial, Canada was, until '82, until the patriation actually happened, Canada was merely a colony of Britain. So the colony Canada, they came to me and asked me if I would close my office in England, they would give the rights protection that we wanted according to the written sections that we had produced ourselves, and when he came in, when Mr. Critchin came to me during a parliamentary committee meeting, he asked me if I would close my office in England, they would ensure that we had our protection for Aboriginal and treaty rights. And I shook his hand on that, and to me, for this new Canadian government, this was beginning of their the honor of the crown as we know it today, and which is a very powerful thing, because it meant they would have to keep their word. Now the Métis, and at the same discussion, the government came and asked me if I would take out Métis out of the loop there, and I said no. I said I promised them, and I keep my promises. But they come in without the same kind of rights as Inuit or the Indian people. But I knew that at some point the government would have to deal with them like they've dealt with the French, or like they've dealt with the other Caucasoid people from Europe as groups in Canada. Even though they've had the connection to the First Nations people through primarily through the Red River area, because this is in fact where the Métis actually first became recognized. So they did get in, and it unfortunately a lot of the real understanding of how they got in and why they got in was never really discussed, and I know I've never had a discussion with them after the sections were put in. But there was no other Métis groups in Canada, just the Red River Métis that are, in fact, in my opinion, because of my discussions with them, that is the one that we recognized as the Red River area Métis, which would probably cover Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta, but nothing more than that. And so I to keep the strength of our side as high as I possibly could. I wanted them to be on our side, and which of course they were at the time. But they're real. The inclusion in there was not for any legal reason or for any other reason other than they had some connection to the Aboriginal people in the past, or some of their people. So in the end, they do not have Aboriginal and treaty rights, and they, as such, are just Canadians. So for them to claim they have anything more than that, it's untrue. And but I'm glad the government is finally dealing with them and giving them programs. But essentially, that is the highest they could possibly go with them, because they have no original source of ancestry here, like the First Nations people. They are not they are not I guess they're not nations like I think we have something like 54 different well, as the government calls us Indian, they have 54. We have 54 different Indian nations here, and they are internationally recognized through that status is recognized because of the treaty status, which was made between England and the First Nations here, and to ensure that these rights carried on. We also assisted in several wars with the against the Americans, and in fact, it was our people that ended up fighting off the Americans in the War of 1812-14, and the British had retreated and left us to fight, which we did, and the border was finally established that way, right or wrong. That's because of the First Nations. They were called on one more time during the 1837 rebellion, and so all the warriors from, I know Six Nations sent 500, Ojibways had also hundreds of warriors along the border, so that the rebellion never, it fizzled out because of that, and so the second time we saved the borders of Canada. And there was a lot of things that had to be done, and I'm not going to go into too much more than that, because now many of the racial problems that many racial problems had come up because of maybe because of the experience of the Caucasoid people from Europe and their interpretation of doctrine of discovery, which sort of denigrated the brown-skinned people into something far less than their version of what they considered a human being, which in fact is a bunch of nonsense. And of course they introduced their various religions, of course, and but in all of this, I think a lot of that didn't have any effect. In the end, what is important today is what are those rights, and a lot of this stuff we have to clearly define yet, and work is only beginning on a lot of that. But But in the end, we do have to get rid of this huge racial problem that we have. It's in Canada. It's Canada's Apartheid Act called the Indian Act, and which has kept us totally out of the economy of the country and left us in a situation very similar to what the Palestinians are in, with control over their lives by having absolute control over the Indian Act chiefs and councils, which were formed from the Indian Act and can only pass any kind of law. I guess the only option they have is could make bylaws, but there's no space to make any more unless it complies with the rest of Canadian law. So the result has been essentially nothing has ever passed because again it is the Indian Act is the Canadian government, and chief and council then are really part of the Canadian government, and that remains a slight problem that can be resolved. I do have a lot of thoughts about that, and I believe we can fix that in the near future. Yeah. Well, that's total bunch of nonsense, and we've only have to look back in history at the actual history, and you'll find they never had any land at all, nothing, and they were clearly formed because some Caucasian lady jumped into a Cree teepee at one time, and that's the origin of the Metis. So they have no claim to land, nothing, and that's bottom line. And for somebody like Ontario, where the feds to get embroiled in this kind of controversy is again nonsense on their side. They have no rationale, no legal or constitutional or treaty right to any of this stuff. And it remains primarily, totally with the First Nations. But there's a lot that I believe the nations in the number treaties and Western provinces have to learn about the true nature of their treaties, and I see they're a bit behind now, and but they can be brought up and so that they can stand up as true nations and perhaps even develop their resources, which they own on all of their treaty lands. The government never paid them a cent for their treaty lands yet. They own it, not a province. And a province today is only an administrative unit of the federal government, according to their BNA Act. Now there's a huge question around the BNA Act, because it was only recognized as in 1867, still as only a colony of Britain. And it's my belief that they had absolutely no right to introduce the racist Indian Act. But that only brought the provinces into this whole game of racism, which we face from both the federal government and the province. And as a matter of fact, even at this point in time, I've had to jump in and defend many of the First Nations against these racial incursions into their rights. And I've won. The cases I've gone in and defended, we've won those. But they're hard fought, and we will continue. And if we have to go all across Canada, we'll do that. I think Treaty 9 needs to learn more about the true nature of their rights, because there's a lot of questions of whether or not that treaty itself is even valid, because I believe they have a province in there, but which the province has no right, no treaty making rights. They're not a state, so they have no rights in that at all. And I think they've only come in because of their racial position on it, not for any legal reason.
Hi everyone, my name is Del Riley. I'm former president of the National Indian Brotherhood. I was involved as the national president. It was my position that we needed protection in Canada's highest law, the Constitution. I then proceeded to implement it and get them put in the Constitution, which after a long, hard fight, we finally got some of the sections in. The two important ones were Section 25 and 35. This book contains how this all came about, 8 years of TB in residential schools. I had to go back and relive some of the horror of residential schools. I'd like to dedicate this book to all of the survivors out there. Purchase this book below.